Hello guys, in this video I'm going to show you everything that you need to know for testing your smart contracts, everything that you need to know for deploying your contracts on the website, your decentralized applications. You already know how to deploy your contracts. Now you need to deploy your decentralized applications on the web. You can use a server, but I will show you a free method which is perfect for deploying your decentralized applications without having to worry about servers, about paying hosting and anything. We will use GitHub for that. Now I'm going to show you how to test that smart contract for making sure it's secure and it works as expected. So let's open our project like we did before. I mean, you can do this with whatever smart contract that you have. The only thing that matters is that the contract is in Solidity and you are using Truffle. So we have this project, there is nothing there. We need to use the framework Truffle, which is a tool for helping us develop the contracts, for testing them, basically for making everything easier for us. So let's go to your project, open your terminal or a command line and go to your project, then execute npm install /g truffle. This will install Truffle on your system. The G flag means global, it's everywhere. Now just execute Truffle in it and it will generate the structure. Something already exists, please unblock. Okay, we need to do this in an empty folder. Instead of going to that folder, go to create a new folder. In this case I already have one called decentralized blog, and I will start Truffle there. So go to that folder, decentralized blog, Truffle. The folder must be empty when you start Truffle. Now you see that we have the contracts. Migrations, test, Truffle, and Truffle configuration. These two files are the same. These are used for different configuration things when you're using Truffle. Contracts, here we just have our necessary contracts. Migrations, we don't need that. You can remove that file. Here you will put all your contracts. Migration, this is for setting up how you want to deploy your contracts, because Truffle allows you to deploy your contract directly from the command line. You don't need to use Remix or anything. With Truffle you can deploy it from the command line, and this initial migration is the file that we will use for deploying the contracts, for setting up the constructor. Right now we don't need it, so don't worry about that. And test is where we will write our test files. So go to your contract folder and paste your smart contract. In my case it's called blog. It's a Solidity file. And then open that file with your text editor. Add project folder, centralized blog, select folder. Close your previous folder if you have it, and you can see that we have the block inside the contracts folder. That is important. Next, we need to configure this truffle.js file. I'm not exactly sure how this is done, so I will take a look at one previous project. Every time you feel lost or you don't know exactly how to go when you want to do something, you can go to your previous projects. I do that a lot. You can go to Google, Stack Overflow, anywhere, until you find your solution. In my case, I want to set up some configuration, but I don't remember exactly how I want to do that. So I go to a previous project with Solidity decentralized to-dos. Yes, it must be this one. Basically, we need all this. Go to your Truffle configuration file and paste this code or write this code, which is development, host, local host, the port, and the network ID. We will need that later for executing our blockchain. This Truffle config is exactly the same file. We can leave it as it is. So just change your truffle.js. Now go to test and create a new file called block.js. Block with lowercase. The initial letter is lowercase because this is a JavaScript file and it uses camel case, so the next letter will be an uppercase letter. You know what I mean? So in this file we will write our test for the contract. The first thing that we need to do is we need to import the contract. Do this const, we create a new variable called block, and we do artifacts that require and block. This will give us the contract that we want to use for testing. We can console log that. And now if we want to execute this test, right now there's no test, there's nothing. If we want to execute this test file, we have to install a new plugin, a new module for this project. So do npm install /g ganache CLI. That's a test blockchain that we will use for deploying this contract and for testing how it works. Let me see it here. It's just an utility for creating blockchains, Ethereum blockchains. Just execute test RPC. I don't know if that is the recommend. Yes, I think that is the recommend, or Ganache. Just execute Ganache CLI and you will have this. This is the blockchain basically. You have several accounts, you have the private keys and a wallet. You can see that it's listening on localhost 8545. That is where the blockchain is available in that port. So now if you want to execute the tests, you need to open another command line, another terminal. Go to the same folder and execute truffle test. You can see that it's compiling. You could not find artifacts. Let me see what is going on. Let's go to migrations. It's requiring migrations. You have to go to the migrations folder, and instead of migrations you change this to block, which is the contract that you want to deploy. If you remember, I said earlier that migrations is a file used for deploying your contracts. You basically change the contract that you want to deploy to this one, to blog, and you deploy the contract. Let's try again. Truffle test. Could not find artifacts for migrations. I don't know what's that error. Let's try to recover the migrations file from before. Restore and then execute this again. Okay, you need the migrations contract, otherwise it won't work. As you can see, you need this file to be there. Just leave it like there and execute the truffle test. Now there is some migrations. This is an error from the migrations file, which is kind of ridiculous. Let me see. I execute the test and I get this. This is the block contract. Okay, now what we need to do is, let me check. I think we have to say so. Let's try this again. So it doesn't really matter. You can write block without the solidity extension, or you could write just block and it will work anyway. Okay, now we have the contract. This is the contract that we will use for testing. Now you need to import the assert library. Basically const assert require assert. Assert is just a library from Node.js for testing if two values are equal. You can use Chai, Mocha, those are different. Expect, those are different libraries for testing. I use assert because it's simpler and I like it. Then we need to create the instance. Yes, that's what we need to do. Let's create the contract instance and create the contract, which will be called blog, and this. Inside this contract we have the accounts here. Inside this contract section we will write all of our tests. So just The first thing that we need to do is we have to deploy this contract, because right now we have the code, but we need to use the deployed version of that contract. You know what I mean? Block is just the code. We need to use the deployed version of that smart contract. To do that, we create a before each, and we simply execute. I don't know if this is async. Contract instance is equal to block.deployed. We have to await because this is a promise. And this is the contract. Every time a test is executing, a new contract is deployed. A new block is deployed on this blockchain that we created earlier. Now you can start writing your test. All tests start with the IT keyword, and you write the test. For instance, in our contract, it should, for something simple like the article's content should be 0 at the beginning. Should be 0 at the beginning. And then you write async and the content of the test. So to test this, which simply we can create a variable like this. There are different ways of testing. It depends on how you want to do it. I like to keep an organized version of each test, so I write something like expected value is 0 and the actual value is contract instance dot articles counter. We have to wait for this, and now we can console log before even executing the test. We can console log the values. Cool. Now we have to execute the test again with truffle test. Okay, this is a constant. It should be a let type of variable. You can see that the actual value that we are getting is a big number. This is a big number, you see, and it has this value. This value just means 0. We need to parse that information to be able to use it. A big number is just a representation of a number without losing values, because if you try to store big numbers like 10 millions, 100 millions in JavaScript, at some point you will lose the precision. So instead of storing 10 million, you may store 9,900,000 and so on. It's not that precise in JavaScript, so that's why you have to use big number, which is a library for storing big numbers safely without losing the values, the exact values, because we are interested in the exact values, especially when dealing with the blockchain. As you can see, now the value is 0 and the expected value is 0. We can just write a test, an assert equal. This function checks that both of the values are equal, and if not, it throws an exception which breaks the test completely. And we can write a message. This is checking that these values are the same. If they are the same, nothing happens, the test executes properly. And if they are not the same, if they are not equal, this message will be displayed. So the values are not equal, something like this. You can execute truffle test again and see if that test is passing or not. Don't worry about this. This is just some warnings from the migrations solidity file, which is not relevant right now. This is the test, which is executing properly. You see, there's a tick which is passing, and that's correct. Now, if we set a value of something like 2, well, first of all, this is not correct. We have to parse that information. Well, this test is passing even though this is a big number, because it's converting these values to number. They're both being converted to number, even though this is a big number. So it's checking the actual values, and they are the same. But it's good to parse that information before doing any test, because you don't know what is going on. Now if I say something like 4, which is 0, this is 0 and 4, they are not equal, so it should break the test. Let's try again and see if that happens or not. You can see there is an assertion error, and it's failing. The contract is failing. This is the number, and the error, the same number, is here for more details, because sometimes you have a list of a lot of errors, and they put numbers for each error just so you can find each one of them after reading the results. Here's an explanation. This is not, the values are not equal. You can see the message, the values are not equal, and expected and actual. This is exactly what is returning. The actual value is this one. Now this is just a test, a simple test, an example. Let's write an actual test. So we take a look at the contract, and there's only one function. When you write tests, you usually want to test the functions. You want to make sure that all the functions are working. You don't care about the variables at the beginning, because the values are properly set up at the beginning. There is nothing to test, and you want to test the constructors, the functions, and everything that you find dangerous, that you find confusing. So this function, we want to test that it is publishing an article correctly. It should publish an article correct. Then we do async. Now to test this function, we do the same thing. We want to create an expected value. The expected value in this case is that how do we check that the test is working? How do we check that the article is being published? We first execute the test, we first execute the publish function, and if there is no errors, okay, so here's the thing. We first publish the article. We go await contract instance dot publish article, and we just create a test article, like this is a test. This is the content. As you can see, these are the parameters of the function. Then after executing this, we need to check that the contract, the article is published where we want that to be published. So I usually like to keep things organized this way. Title is this one. Title, content, this one. Now after publishing the article, we can check that this article is exactly there. How do we check that the article is being published? It's stored on the contract. We go to the articles, which is a public variable. We do something like this: const my article contract instance. We await articles, and we say the first article. Now before executing the test, let's see what are we getting when we execute the test. I want to know, I don't know exactly what is in my article, so I will check before executing the actual test. Let's log that and execute truffle test. You can see both tests are passing, and we're getting this. My article is an array with the title, the content, the owner, the timestamp, and the ID in a big number. We only care about the content, about the test, about the content. The rest is, we can check for this, but we don't really care about that for now. So we just simply do assert dot equal title is equal to my article 0. 0 is the first element of the array, and it is the title, as you can see here. 0 is this one. We are getting an array. My article is an array, and the 0 is the title. If it is not passing, we just show the title is not correct. Then we do the same with the content. You see, we can use the same content variable here, which is the content is not correct. Now we can execute that and see if it's working or not. Okay, both of them are passing and it's working. We have to try different things. For instance, we want to check if an empty title works. First we have to decide what conditions this should be working and when this should not be working. Usually when you publish an article, you don't want this to be empty. You don't want an empty title, you don't want an empty content. That's why it's important to check for that. So, I mean, right now we are not checking if the title or the content is empty, so we write a test for that. It should not allow the title of the article to be empty. We're just testing the limits of the function. We are seeing if an empty title works, if an empty content works, and so on. So we do the same thing. We copy this past test for keeping things easier, and then we write an empty title. The content is there, it's not empty, so it's publishing the same thing. The title should be, I mean, when this happens, when this is executing, this should return an error. This should throw an exception. This should break the test by stopping this test. So what we do is we create a try catch like this, a try catch, and basically this should explode. This should break the contract. If it's exploding, we don't care about this right now. If this is exploding, we say assert dot okay true. This is saying that the test is correct, everything is correct, there are no problems there. Otherwise, if this is not exploding, if this is not throwing an exception, this should be false. This should the function should not allow empty titles. So we execute that. You can see there's a problem here because should not allow the title of the article to be empty. The empty title is not working. It's throwing an exception, which is correct. Let me try again. What if I remove the try catch? Okay, so it looks like this test is passing. For some reason, when we execute this with an empty title, it is throwing an exception, so the contract is stopping and it's not allowing us to publish an empty title. So this is correct, it should be working like this, because when this is executing, it goes to here, which is correct. It is a catch. Now we can console log the article has not been published, and we can see the error. Test again just to see what is returning. You can see a second error, the function should not allow. Looks like this is throwing an exception. When I am executing this publish article function, this is going through, there are no errors there, but when I execute this, it is throwing an exception which is captured by this thing, and that shouldn't be happening. So we just take this out and move it outside let's create a boolean is executing function equals to true. Otherwise here's false. So basically here is checking that the function is false. If is executing, it should throw this error, else should throw this another error. If it's not executing the function, then the test is correct. If it is executing, the function should not allow empty titles. So let's try again and see what happens. The function should not allow empty titles. There's a problem in there. So we need to check that this title is not empty. How do we check for that? We use a require function. And now for checking empty strings, I wrote something in my book about empty strings. Let me check that and I'll come back to you. The way to check if a string is empty is to convert it to bytes and check the first value of it. So bytes title, it's the first value is 0 if it's equal to 0. I think that's how you test it. Let me try with remix and see how it goes. When you're confused with when you don't know exactly if that is working, you go back to remix and you try your changes there. So require title. We will use the YAML script with virtual machine, which allow us to test the changes without having to deploy it on the Rapster network. This is just a test blockchain, but on remix. It's like doing this thing. It's like this test blockchain. Is this even working? Let me try to execute the test again. Oh, I see. When you execute your test, you want to use the development flag. Development. Nope. It's not working for some reason. It should be executing this thing. Truffle help. Truffle test help. I don't know why this is compiling. This shouldn't be compiling, because we're trying to use this network. Development. Let's try to open again this thing. Truffle test the development. How is this being executed? So if I remove this, for some reason this is executing. Okay, I mean, I tried to do this before and it wasn't working without this, so you don't even need this test RPC. You can just use truffle test, because I think they're using in this new version, they're creating a new virtual machine blockchain on the background, so you don't have to worry about that. Now this is working. Let's try again here. Deploy on the virtual machine and let's use an empty title. This is the content. Okay, you have to use double quotes. Publish article. You see invalid code. It is throwing an error because we're using an empty title, and because we're checking this require. Now just use another title which is not empty, and you see that is processing properly. Okay, we made the changes, and now the function is not allowing to publish empty titles. We can do the same with the content. and we can create a new test with the same thing, but for the content. Should not allow the content to be empty. This is the title and the content is empty. The function should not allow empty content. Now we can execute this again. Okay, it's working. As you can see, we have made several tests for our application and they are all passing. We made some changes because we realized that there are some things that are not working in our content, so we had to make changes on our smart contract. This is the ideal situation. You make some tests, you see that some are not working, and you make changes to your initial contract for fixing those values. Now what we want to do is we want to deploy our application. If you can see, HTTP server. Well, the problem is that our application is in a separate folder. So go back to your initial folder and move all this inside a distribution. Create a new folder in your Truffle project called dist. Remember that we have to create a new empty Truffle project for this. So go back to that project, create a dist folder, which is just the name that everybody uses for this type of folders, and move all your frontend there. You don't need the contract to be there. This is all the frontend. And basically do the same thing with HTTP server dist. This will show the application on that place. Localhost. You can see that the application is still working. There are no errors, even though I'm not connected to MetaMask. That's weird. What if I try to open this application without MetaMask? You can see it's empty, and we have an error because Web3 is not defined because MetaMask is not being injected. Here it's working because I'm using MetaMask and I'm connected on this network. If I try to use the main network, you can see that it's empty because there are no articles in that network. If I use Repston, there's everything in there. Now, how do you deploy this application that you just created, your dApp? You go to GitHub and you make an account, you create a new organization. For instance, let's call this decentralized block. It's a free plan. Create organization. Okay, we need an email. In the case, I will use this email. Decentralized blog, and create again. Invite members. We don't want to invite anybody, and we just submit this thing. We can create a new repository called decentralized blog.io. Let me check GitHub pages. We're using GitHub pages for publishing our application. github.io, decentralized blog.github.io. We don't need any of this, so let's create this repository and copy all of this. Okay, let's git init. Now go back to your folder, git init, then git config remote origin URL, and just paste. What you have to do is you have to execute this command: git config remote origin URL HTTPS, your username. This is the name of your account, the name of your main account. In this case, it's Merunas. Then the password. This is your password. And at github.com/. In this case, it is called decentralized blog. So you copy that decentralized blog, and all of this you copy all of that like this. decentralized blog, decentralized blogs, GitHub IO. I will do that thing right now. You're not seeing anything because I don't want you to see my passwords. Let's just git pull, git add all, git commit, first commit, git push, set upstream, origin master. Okay, we just push the content there. You can see we have all of this here. Now you can see your application in this domain. However, it takes some time to work. You have to wait for a couple of hours. I will show you. I realized that the application is not being published on GitHub pages because all of our HTML, JavaScript files are in the dist folder. As you can see, if you go to your project, you will see that it's inside the dist folder. In my case, it's inside that folder. But you need to have those files, all these files, the index and so on, outside. They must be in the root directory of your application, of your project. Now, I made a change. I added those changes to GitHub, as you can see here, git push and all of that. And the application is working. If you go to decentralizedblog.github.io, you will see the application right there. So remember that. Make sure that you are publishing your index, your frontend in the root folder, and you will see the changes in the GitHub pages after some time. It's pretty straightforward. So that's about it. Hope you learned something and practice what you learned right now.